Well, our studio guest this morning is the Minister for Communications, Senator Stephen Conroy. But first, we'll see what the Sunday papers are covering around the country, and they're in fact covering that very story. Dennis Atkins, Joe Hockey and the Coalition, it seems as if they're going to go ahead with some sort of legislation against to try and rein in the banks.
Yeah, it's still unclear exactly what they're going to do, but Joe Hockey is continuing to talk about it. He's talking about having a social compact between the banks and the government. And he still holds out the possibility of legislation. There has been a suggestion of increasing the powers of the competition watchdog, the ACCC. But Joe Hockey's problem during the week was that he didn't have any specific proposals, and so everybody could interpret him any way they wanted to, and he ended up looking like he didn't know what he was talking about.
Yeah, but it's a good headline, isn't it?
It was a good, easy headline. I mean, bashing the banks is one of the easiest headlines. You know, that and the petrol companies.
I mean, it just struck me watching Wayne Swan. I mean, Labor defending the banks.
Yeah. But then again, if you put up a political solution that you're putting up only for political purposes, the danger is the Greens might support it, exactly. And it'll become law.
Yeah. You've got to have a second paragraph. I mean, you say, let's jump ugly on the banks. The obvious question is, how do you propose to jump ugly? And you've got to have an answer to that, and he didn't. And he didn't for about 3 or 4 hours, and it just took off without him. And as you can see, it's sort of...
Well, he actually... Pretty extraordinary for a politician to go out there and not have a second paragraph.
Well, Phil, John Howard in his book says that Labor would have won the election comfortably, in fact, if they'd retained Kevin Rudd as leader.
Controversial call. Certainly the Labor Party didn't think that when they dumped him. Certainly a lot of people in the Liberal Party, in the travelling party with Tony Abbott, I spoke to on the campaign, thought they would have flogged Labor if Rudd was the leader. We're never going to know, I guess. He wouldn't have had the problems that Gillard had. A, there wouldn't have been a legitimacy problem about his prime ministership, and B, there wouldn't have been the spectre...
He might have had a Gillard problem.
Well, there wouldn't have been the spectre of there wouldn't have been the leaks and all that sort of business, so it would have been a less cluttered campaign.
But also, and John Howard makes the point, he says that Kevin Rudd would have been able to deliver a clear, simple message. Now, there was no evidence of that in the last 6 months.
Yeah. You think about what he's saying, though. He's saying that even though Kevin Rudd had abysmal polling figures, and he would have been exposed to a savage campaign on climate change and insulation and so on, he still, even in those circumstances, would have beaten Tony Abbott. What does that say about... Do you really think that's something Tony Abbott wanted to hear?
I'll raise a proposition with you, Barry. What if Peter Costello had run?
Oh, good. Yeah. But it's look, we never will know. But you know, obviously Rudd and a few in the Labor Party think Rudd would have won. But you've got to remember, it was the leaks that killed Gillard in the second week. That killed her campaign. If whoever did it wanted to fire one across the bow, actually hit the convoy amidships. That was the problem, and she never recovered.
Who do you think it was?
You know, she never recovered from it, and had that not been for that, she probably would have won, not hugely, but just comfortably. Yeah. And I think it's all coulda, shoulda, woulda sort of stuff now.
Yeah, and John Howard should maybe explain why, if Kevin Rudd was such a good campaigner, he's still got a swing of almost 10% primary in his own seat.
Why he hung on.
OK, Glenn, Barry O'Farrell, the opposition leader in New South Wales, is having some Twitter problems.
Oh, my God, Barry. Yes, fat fingers have put Barry over a barrel. Barry O'Farrell has his big fingers to blame for appearing to promote pornography. Now, I rise in the defence of pornography. Look, you know, during the Bradfield by-election, I spammed the Sex Party, who was a candidate, and I got splattered. And I think this is Barry O'Farrell's problem, and I don't think there's anything to blame him.
And in this case, what, he inadvertently passed on some other...
Yes, I mean, basically, fat fingers. I mean, you know, he whatever he put in the computer, you know, that came back. But I don't think there's anything into this.
And last night, James Packer, who's buying into Channel 10, of course, was out and about and ran into the Communications Minister, Stephen Conroy, our next guest.
Yes, true. I think it's a good move by James Packer. I always thought that the move by 10 into 2 hours news was fraught with danger. I mean, this is a 16 to 30 demographic, and the idea of putting George Negus in there to present the news,
It was 2.5 hours of news with an international news at 6 o'clock.
A big risk. And I think Packer has seen this and he's moved. And if I was Nick Falloon, I'd be a worried man.
It might be more about sport than the news
sport,
with the anti-siphoning. And anyway, we'll go through that with Stephen Conroy, who